Good morning, and thank you very much for including me on this panel. And it's great to listen to Vavi with his enormous energy. And I think my job has been made much easier because, Minister, despite what you said, this is not simply the DA making your good story bad. There is a bad story in this country. And we need to face up to it if we are to address the challenges that have been set out by Vavi so clearly. I would like to take you to where I come from to be doing what I'm doing today. In the 1970s, we fought for freedom and dignity, for the right to be who we were and are, a people of dignity and worth. It was, for all intents and purposes, a fight against an edifice back then that seemed immovable. But it was a just struggle. And so we fought without regard to personal interests because we fought for what was right. The early consequences of that fight were dire. We saw death, detention, banishment, suffering, and blunted aspiration. We lived lives that in many respects were not ours. When the unexpected happened, our joy was unconstrained. Imagine our happiness after so much suffering. 1994 was in many respects the end of an era. Freedom attained, dignity restored, a bright future in sight. In my case, it was an opportunity to realize personal goals, to redirect my energies, to make a contribution to improving the lives of all those I came across. It was a time of developing normally in a normal world. Madiba, of course, created a world where hope burned brightly for years. All was possible. When he left the political stage, the decline began. But the decline was slow and gradual, almost unobtrusive. Apart from the occasional glaring misstep, as happened with the HIV/AIDS denialism, we didn't quite feel that we're going into decline. The boiling frog syndrome. We were cooking, but we didn't feel it. Into that decline stepped Jacob Zuma. Now I find myself at age 67, having made my contribution, having to step back into the breach, to work with others to save our freedom and to preserve our dignity. It is important to understand this clearly. Few 67-year-olds with a life history of suffering and struggle with some means would willingly step into the world of politics. In fact, I thought it would never happen to me. But how does one stand aside when so much wrong is happening in the name of democracy? How does one, a part of a small band who lay down their lives for freedom and dignity walk away when all we fought for is threatened? No, we must stand and fight again. Our struggle now is against old enemies, the tyranny of impunity, corruption, refusal of accountability. I mean, to have a president saying, I didn't ask for what's happening in my homestead, and so I owe you nothing. That's the extent of impunity that we are dealing with. It is theft from those who stood to gain from freedom that so many died fighting for. We have been reminded of Chris Honey's words and his yearning. He must be turning 1,000,000 times in his grave. If those of us who laid the bedrock that Madiba built on stand back, what will be left for our grandchildren? Standing back is not an option. It is not an option for me, nor is it an option, as we increasingly hear from Ronnie Castros, from Jay Naidu, from Trevor Manuel, nor for the thousands of ANC stalwarts who mourn the loss of their ANC. Why then, you ask, did I begin a political party to fight back? I believe that after years of conversations with like-minded people, that the ANC now is in the death grip of the corrupt, greedy, and arrogant. People who don't actually see that they are destroying this beautiful country and its resources. This country bows and scrapes before one man. He's called number one. The obsession, I dare say, Minister, with Mr. Zuma is within the ANC. They are the people who are obsessed with Zuma. They were prepared to kill for Zuma. And now, that sort of presidency was inconceivable under Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Oliver Tambo. Having said that, one has to acknowledge that the opposition is severely limited as well. That we have to acknowledge that we don't have the kind of mass appeal, mass energizing of South Africa's people that can remove this government which is governing with such impunity. We need to think very clearly about how we mobilize an effective coalition of opposition groups to put a stop to this impunity and restore the dignity of our democracy so that people can hold their heads high. We have to undertake this task before Mr. Zuma destroys our country. The remainder of the small parties also need to acknowledge that they have limitations. But whenever I'm asked this question of what difference does a small party make, I think back on the 70s. There were only 15 great unwashed students who started the Black Consciousness Movement. We redefined the very lexicon of what South Africans call themselves. We used to call ourselves non-whites, non-Europeans. Those 15 great unwashed changed the language. So never underestimate the power of individuals to change the course of history. When cooperation and courage mix, all is possible. And there is a great deal to fight for in this country. Remember that more voters remain outside of the pool of voting. In 2009, 13 million people didn't vote because they couldn't bring themselves to vote for a corrupt ANC, nor to vote for the DA or any of the parties that were there. Here we are facing an election in a few weeks' time. No other democracy anywhere in the world would be contemplating that a government with this track record of corruption and failure of performance at the very basic things would be expecting to be returned to power. So something is critically wrong with our politics. We don't yet have a democracy where citizens hold those in power accountable. It is this status quo and the ongoing failures of our political culture that has created the EFF. Let us be honest about this. The EFF appeals to young black men and women who have grown tired of waiting for government to provide meaningful solutions. It is this status quo and the ongoing government failure that enables this group of angry young people to espouse policies that we know can only lead to ruin in our country. Let us note that analyses show that their policies would bankrupt this country in less than a year. And we have seen it happen in Venezuela. We have seen it happen in Zimbabwe. It's not impossible. So let us not treat the EFF as something to joke about. It's a serious, serious challenge and threat to the future of this country. But the problem is the root cause, the despair that we have created as adults of this country, not having created a future that young people can really look forward to. Because to think about what shareholder will stand back and allow their mines to be taken over? What farmer would stand back and allow their land to be taken over? What entrepreneur, what business owner would be willing to be dictated to by a government under that regime? But what we can expect is that if we continue with the kind of approach to governance that we have today, we will not only have those so-called service delivery strikes, which are quite frankly uprisings against a failed governance system, particularly at the local level. Something fundamental needs to happen. And we must start hearing the voices of voters who don't think that their voices matter, which is why they resort to violence. Agang's policies have been built from the ground up. Ours are simple yet effective and proven policies. Most importantly, they are what the citizens want. But policies are not enough. They must be accompanied by political will, the will to put people first. So, what did the citizens tell us? It's summed up in 5 E's. 1, they want empowerment. Citizens feel that they don't have the power to shape the future. And this is not just poor people. It includes business people who sit quietly while destructive policies are being put together because they're afraid. We believe that we need civic education in this country so that citizens can understand that they have the power. They are the owners of this democracy, and they need to hold those in power accountable. What the ANC has done is to give people an anesthetic called food parcels, RDP houses, terrible education, so that people don't have the power to hold them accountable. We want to put a stop to that. And that brings me to the second E, education. We never imagined when we were fighting for freedom that 20 years down the line, we'll have an education that is worse than the Bantu education that we suffered under. This ANC government is a disgrace. How they got it right to destroy an education and subject young people to this horror that 30%, 40% is a pass mark. How dare they? How dare they undermine the intelligence of South Africans? We believe we need to raise the bar and expect nothing but excellence from public education. We need to make education free from grade 0 to higher education. We can afford it. Just Nkandla alone could cover a few. But seriously, I'm standing here because the apartheid government had full course loan bursaries for people like me. That's how I did my medical degree. How can't we do it now for young South Africans in post-apartheid South Africa? We can if we want to. The third E is employment. Many parties have promised 6 million, 7 million jobs. No government can create jobs in a sustainable way. What we need is to create an environment where the private sector can generate the jobs. But we know that the greatest engine of job creation are small and medium enterprises. What we have done in this country post-1994 is to destroy entrepreneurship with bureaucracy, with corruption. All these development institutions that are supposed to be supporting entrepreneurs have become real soup kitchens for those who are politically connected. If you are a real entrepreneur, you give up. We want to focus on small and medium enterprises to have hubs in every major settlement for entrepreneurs to walk in and get help from business plan all the way to funding. We don't need another minister. We have grown from 28 cabinet ministers to 64. Imagine yours and my tax money just creating a huge, inefficient, corrupt machinery. We need a more effective way of supporting entrepreneurship because small and medium enterprises are the engine of job creation. While we are at it, we are going to shut down the SETAs. 5 to 6 billion is absorbed by those entities. All you see when you drive around Johannesburg, SETA, that SETA, the other SETA, where are the apprentices that they are supposed to be trained? Where are the artisans? Where is the outcome of those? That's the height of impunity. And yet, business people who pay that 1% of payroll are juiced them. Why? Scared. Get up and stand up for what you know is right. We can free up that money and be able to absorb all of the young people who are walking our streets and put them in on-the-job training. I'm dead against the youth subsidy. Like all subsidies, it's not sustainable. The money is there if you shut down those SETAs to do exactly what we need to be doing. There's no need for a subsidy. Use the money for the SETAs to do the work that was supposed to be done, which is to train people and create the skills that we need to drive our economy. We also believe the fifth E, effective government. My goodness, do we have any vision of what that is? Because we have a government with MECs who say, if you take a social grant and then vote for an opposition party, you are a thief. So the normal has become abnormal. This MEC is the thief who's taken my money, which is supposed to be doing social development, and for the whole year leading up to the election, all the money is directed at food parcels to buy votes. What a disgrace. Disgrace. We've got to stop that. We need a government of the people, for the people, by the people. A government which is run by professional, meritocratic, independent public servants who will serve you, not themselves. Who will not be serving number one, but serving you, the big number one. At the age of 67, when I had hoped to lay aside at least some of my struggles, I find myself fighting again. Again, fighting against self-interest, greed, corruption, and for the freedoms and dignity of our people and the leaders who died fighting for that. I do this again with a small but dedicated, committed, trustworthy patriots who have chosen to put aside their own interests and put the country first, and who are unafraid of the big task ahead of us. As we did in the mid-70s, we fight against an opponent that many believe is unmovable. We will move this giant, just as we moved apartheid. We fought against apartheid for almost 20 years, from 1976. Now, 20 years into democracy, we fight again. Because it is a just and a right fight. To end corruption, reclaim our dignity, and again build ours into a winning country together. It is a fight we will fight to answer the cries of those millions left out in the political wilderness. It is a fight I have fought before. It is a fight Agang will win, together with empowered citizens across this nation. It is a fight worth fighting. Thank you.
Know more. ENCA.com